All right, welcome. We are here with Freddie Mendoza. He is our first drum major at Taft High School, and Freddie has done a lot, and definitely Freddie encompasses the idea that Taft will take you places. Freddie, we were just talking before we got started, and I want people to know that this whole idea of the alumni band or the alumni group started when you came back and you played with us for the Team EA Invited Jazz Ensemble program. And I think it was you and Jason Grant, and we were in a rehearsal in Band Hall 2. And we played with the band, and you were kind of talking to the kids, and you were like, hey, like this feels like home and this is family. And that was the moment that this whole idea of an alumni group was born. And it took us a little while to get it figured out how we're going to do it. But man, it's so good to talk to you again and see you again. And you've come back a couple of times, and we really appreciate having you here, Freddie.
I appreciate it. Likewise, it was really an honor to be contacted and brought back. I mean, certainly wasn't something that I was on my radar at the time when it happened, but that Taft was able to secure a spot at the TMEA. Having gone through all that, I understand the gravitas of that achievement and, what it takes to get there. And it was truly an honor to be able to come back and play. And it just happened to work out. Taft was the beginning of my professional career as a musician. So that was an opportunity for me to come back and contribute to the program once again, in the same vein that I had before, through music, basically,
Yeah.
I guess you could say.
No, it was cool. And it was such a great performance. And I know a lot of people dug it and loved it. Can you talk about when you came to Taft, when Taft opened is when you came here? What was that like coming from another school? And like, how did you guys develop your community here, even though it was being created?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, so in my case, my whole family went to John Marshall High School, and most of them either went to Patton F Middle School or Coke Stevenson. I ended up going through Coke Stevenson, but we all ended up at Marshall. So they were well aware of my last name when I got to Marshall High School. And, and at the time I was young and usually don't know the workings of the district or what was going on, didn't even know that the school was coming up. So when it happened and I found out, like a lot of us did, that we were going to be going to the new school, at that time, it was kind of heartbreaking because, I had not thought that would even have been a possibility. And I figured I would graduate. And as you know, John Marshall is, I believe, maybe the oldest school or one of the oldest schools in Northside. There's a lot of history there. And at the time, they also happened to have an award-winning music program. And I was heavily invested in that. I had already made the All-State Band as a sophomore. And, there were a lot of uncertainties. It was kind of a scary time. And I was sad to leave John Marshall. But when we got to Taft, I think one of the things that really kind of became apparent right away was because there was no senior class and there were no previous traditions and the school was brand new, it really gave the junior class and the other students as well, but really it kind of fell to the junior class to start to develop these traditions. And in that, it probably brought me into a much more of a active and participating role in the entire school itself, as opposed to just being a student and like any other student showing up to school, doing my work and trying to get good grades. Those of us who were involved in the Taft Band program were responsible for putting together everything from how we rehearsed to, my grandfather built the first drum major box. We had to create everything because we didn't have anything. And of course, we tried to borrow what we could from where we came from because we didn't all come from Marshall. But, it put us in a position where we would be a lot more involved in really the development of the school itself as a school than we would have been as just more cogs in the wheel coming through the system. So it did engender a sense of family. And, our football team was not really comprised of actual football players that played football throughout their middle school and into high school. There were people who had never played football that were going out for the team just to fill bodies. And I think we only won one game the entire year. And so it became even like we would have celebrations because we lost another game. And interestingly enough, the one football game we lost, after the game, that was the one time that nobody got together after the game because we didn't know what to do. We won the game and we all just went home. It became, celebrating about being the worst football team in the conference became sort of a way for us to bond together as the underdogs. Our marching band was in the same bracket as the other schools that had 200 or 300 or 150 to 200 kids on the field. We had 60. We had a small band, and it wasn't necessarily a well-balanced instrumentally band. It had a lot, too many flutes and clarinets and saxophones, not enough brass. And so it kind of, all of that, I don't know that I would have called it turmoil or strife. It was just the situation brought us very close together as a group of students. And because we were kind of, the first pep rallies was kind of up to the students and how that thing was going to go and how it all happened. So I think, I can't speak to people who just went to a school for 4 years and graduated, in the tradition of the school, but it was something special to be a part of that first class that graduated. And, a lot of us still stay in touch with each other. We've got our groups. There have been a few reunions throughout the years, but I think the fact that we had to come in and start everything made a huge difference in my high school experience, because I really felt like, and even looking back, felt like I was a part of shaping, at least maybe for the next several years, what that program was. And I'm sure as it went forward in time and the area grew, it changed, like things do. But, and it's nice to go back. When I went back, I got to, the band hall still in the same place. The practice rooms that I practiced in were still there. It's just bigger now. And I was really happy to see that it was a school that really kind of cherished its origins. So obviously, because it is still in the pantheon of schools there in the North Side, still one of the younger schools compared to some of the other schools. It's been around now for a long time, but when you compare it to Clark and Marshall and schools like that, they've been around for much longer. So it just, but I think that made a huge difference, just being able to be the seniors for 2 years, if you will, is kind of what it amounted to. But yeah, it was a great time. And I don't know that would have happened the same way if I had ended up staying at Marshall. It would have been a very different experience.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You talked about mentioning being an All-State at Marshall as a sophomore, and I know you've made All-State at Taft. I can't remember. Was it both years that you were here?
Yes.
Yeah. Ben talked about this when I met with him a few weeks ago, and I know a student came and asked you about it when we were at our jazz festival last. Ben calls it the Freddie rule.
Yeah.
The year when you auditioned, like everyone was just like, he's going to be great in orchestra, and we're going to lobby for him to be in orchestra, and he's going to be great in the symphonic band, he's going to be great in the jazz band. And I think when that student asked you, like you seemed kind of shocked. Like, were you aware of that at the time?
No, I never heard about that. Honestly, it wasn't until I came back for that concert that I think Ben told me that. And I really didn't know. It's kind of neat. I think probably by this point, I'm sure there have been several students that have been able to achieve the same thing. But yeah, it was what's kind of funny about that whole thing is that I grudgingly played trombone because when I was at Marshall, they wouldn't let me play the baritone in the jazz ensemble. So I had to pick it up. And then I picked up the valve trombone first because I had no interest in playing a trombone. I really loved playing euphonium and valves. But I got a lot of grief from the trombone players for not playing quote unquote a real trombone. So I was kind of peer pressured into picking up an actual slide. And then when I went to Taft, trombone was a secondary instrument. In fact, I didn't own a trombone. Ben Chasen bought me my first trombone. He gave it to me as a gift. And that was my first trombone, but I still played euphonium. And like I said, I even played drums in the jazz ensemble, and I did some trombone, but I often played drums. But a student had dared me, or he kind of challenged me. He called me, he said I had chickened out in auditioning for the orchestra on trombone the year before. At that point, I didn't have a trombone. So I borrowed the school's trombone. They had the brand new bass trombone. And at the time, I didn't even know. I mean, I knew what a bass trombone was, but it didn't occur to me that you wouldn't audition for the principal orchestra part on a bass trombone. That's the only instrument I had. So I recorded the audition, and then I found out that I made the first chair orchestra audition. And then when the jazz had taped around the same time, which I was interested in because I really was into the jazz band, and I got first chair in that. And that's when they said, you can't continue on the euphonium, because the year before I had made first chair euphonium. And unless somebody came out of the woodworking area, which can happen in Alice, Texas, in the South, the border can always bring up surprises that nobody knew were down there, very talented kids coming up from the Valley. It was a good likelihood that I would be okay getting into the All-State band as my senior year. But they said, well, you can't proceed past region. You either have to give up both of the All-State bands to pursue the concert band, or you have to pick one of the other bands and give up the other two, or the chance at the concert band and the All-State orchestra. And that's kind of where my whole career got decided, my future got decided, because I just thought to myself, well, in orchestra, what I do know about trombone is that they rest a lot and they don't play a lot. And I wanted to play my horn, so I picked the jazz instead of, if I had picked the orchestra, for all I know, I may have gone on to become an orchestral trombone player. But I picked the jazz, and that kind of set my path into becoming a jazz musician, because that year the clinician was a jazz trombonist. Actually, he in the rehearsal, this is kind of an interesting story. I didn't know anything about any of that. My parents didn't push me into being a super achiever, and I was, thankfully, it was really Ben Chasen that was responsible for motivating me to get me to do these things. And so kudos to him for sure. But I didn't know when I got all the trombone music for the band that year that there was even a trombone player that was a clinician. So when they handed me the solo parts for the trombone book, I thought that they were for me. So I learned all of the solo parts. And then in the rehearsal, when we played one of the first parts that was a big bebop trombone feature, and I started playing the clinician's part, he let me play for a little while, and he stopped and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm sorry." And he said, "Well, he goes, "You're playing my part." And I said, "What?" "It says first trombone." He said, "No, you're playing the second trombone part. The first trombone is my part. You're the second is the lead." I didn't know that, but because I had played that for him, and I'd really practiced it. Like I learned his whole solo from the album. I learned everything I could before that. And he goes, "I'm going to do something for you at the concert." And I didn't know. And then when the concert came, he said, "I want you to come up front, and we're going to do an encore, and you and I are going to play a tune together." And it was a tune, it was called Unsighted, and it was really fast, and it was in the key of A flat. And I didn't know how to play the trombone very well. And I was really comfortable in the key of F and B flat, but I'd never played the trombone in the key of A flat before. And, if you're a trombone player, that's out on the slide a little bit. It's a little more complicated. And he threw me into the fire. And right before he played, he turned around. He's a big guy. And he turned around to me and faced me and turned his back to the audience. He said, "I'm not going to cut you tonight." That's what he told me. He goes, "I'm not going to cut you tonight." He said, "But I'm going to play. So you better play." And that's what he told me. And I just was like frozen. And then we started playing, and you should go back and listen to the album. We played the album. The melody is very simple. It's repetitive. So I picked up the melody right away, and I started harmonizing with him at the concert. And I was playing a harmony part to his part the whole way through that I just made up on the spot, kind of found the note by playing a wrong note and thought this works. So I just started playing it with him. And then we took our solos, and it was one of those things where it was an out of body experience, and I don't remember much of it, but I just started tonguing and moving my arm. And then when I go back and listen to it now, I listen to it and go, man, that was actually pretty good. And I'm pretty harsh on myself. So I was impressed at how I was not just making a fool out of myself on the stage, but it was an experience that changed my life. And even after all that, I hate to admit this, but I wasn't going to go to college. I got offers from everywhere. I had scholarships everywhere, but I didn't understand any of that. And it wasn't like it is now where, they're getting you ready when you're in middle school to go to college. It wasn't like that at all. So I wasn't going to go to college. And again, Mr. Chasen stepped in and asked me, "Are you going to college? What are you going to do?" And when he realized I wasn't going to go, he made a call to Glenn Richter. And the next thing I know, I was going to be a freshman at UT. And that's how I ended up at UT. And
Wow.
then from there, yeah, it was, I can't count the number of times that I've just fallen backwards into different situations, but I have to credit Ben a lot. And also Ben and Mr. Haracy were the original directors. One thing they did that I thought was really impressive now that I've gone and gotten my master's in education and been educated and been a college professor for all these years and an educator is they gave us a lot of latitude and leeway to chart our own course. They could have very easily come in and been very military about it and said, this is what we're going to do and this is how it's going to go. But they really let us chart our course along the way. And because they gave me a lot of which meant that they were giving us leadership responsibility. And because they gave us that leeway and latitude and responsibility, it really shaped who I became later in life. I was, when I got into college, I was the director of jazz studies at Texas State. I went to UND, I was the director. I was the drum major at Taft. I would always end up inevitably finding myself being put in a position to lead or make decisions. And I think a lot of that started right there in 1985 at Taft High School.
That's awesome.
I can really trace that back.
Man,
And
that's so
yeah.
cool.
And like I said, we all go on with our lives. High school becomes a thing that you did. So when I got the call to come back, it just kind of brought back all those memories after so many years of everything that happened. And then, of course, they have photo books that I've pictures I've never seen, reminded me of what a truly special time it was, and then, of course, since then, I've taught all kinds of students that have ended up at Texas State that are Taft graduates. And, Amanda Mourinho I forget if we were classmates, of course, back at Taft and all that. But, it's some of my classmates from that time are now band directors all over the state, or they're in leadership positions in the music education world or in the professional music educational world. Or the professional music world. So, it truly was a unique time. And I think a slightly different high school experience than maybe some other people might have had, had they not had that opportunity to start at a new school. So in the end, Taft, I'm glad that it ended up the way it did, that the schools got split and I got a chance to go and be at Taft. It would have been nice to be a graduate of Marshall and all that, like my family, but it was really something special to be able to say that I'm part of that first graduating class.
Man, that's
Still,
cool. And one of the stories we were talking a little bit before we started recording, you said that it kind of led into the scrapbooks and seeing the pictures of stuff before, and we have a lot of those. But man, you had a story about like how you guys had like started your own garage band with like Taft people and went on and did like, man, tell us a little more about that so other people can hear that if you don't mind. Like there's some cool stuff about that.
Yeah, well, so, one of the students who was one of the people that came over to Taft with me from Marshall, his name was Mark Daly. He was a tuba player, but he also played the bass, and he played bass in jazz ensemble. And because we didn't have a drummer in the jazz ensemble, and I really wanted to be in a jazz ensemble, we started a jazz ensemble, and I learned how to play the drum set and became a drum set player. And then from that, Mark and I said, well, let's form a band. And a freshman came in that I think it was our real senior year. A freshman came in who was a very gifted young guitarist. And so we all got together with another guitarist and we formed a garage band, and it was all Taft students. And we were pretty good, actually. I remember we played The Cure and Husker Du and Prince and Billy Idol and the Ramones. And we were like this sort of punky party band, and inevitably there would be kids' parents would go out of town, and someone would say, hey, my parents are going out of town, would you guys come rehearse at our house? And we'd go rehearse at their house, and they would call all their friends, and it would turn into a big party like you see in the 80s movies, Pretty in Pink or 16 Candles, all those movies. And that band, we had our rep and we would play the party, and it was a great time. But that band continued after Mark and I left, and they turned into a band. They all graduated eventually, and came up to Austin, Texas. And the original band was called the Cranial Crabs. And we played at the talent show. Somewhere there's a video of that. We played at the first talent show. And I want to say we won the talent show, but I can't remember for sure. But we had original music. We went into a recording studio, recorded music, and we were kind of gigging, if you will. And then the band broke up when the bass player and I, the drummer, left and went to college, but they kept going. In fact, when I was a freshman in college, I brought them out to play at a family party. And they all came out. And that time they had added horns. We didn't have horns in our band. It was just guitar, drums, and bass. They added a horn section. And then that band turned into a band called the Gingerbread Men, which you can look up. And they were a big force in Austin for the whole 90s decade. They played at Liberty Lunch. They played all over the United States. They were opening for big time acts. They were hooking up with Prince and their horns, and like all the big names would come through Austin. They would hook up with the Gingerbread Man because they were this funk band with horns, and they were a great band. They played all the big Austin venues, and eventually they split up. But the members are still active professional musicians in Austin. And one of them, Henry Gutierrez, his dad is his road manager, and they've been together since Taft High School. And he's if you look him up, his name is Henry and the Invisibles is his band. And he's a one-man band, and he's recorded and played with Bootsy Collins from Parliament Funkadelic, and he's played with the guys from Prince, the band Madhouse. That's Prince's band, used to be in the 80s. And he's got a residency in Austin. He plays all over the place. You can find him online. But, some of us, there were a lot of graduates from that particular school and class at that time that are still involved in music education in Texas and or are professional musicians around the scene. And again, I think I trace it back to the fact that we had such freedom as students at Taft at that point that there wasn't anybody there to tell us that we couldn't do something. So we just did these things, and yeah, it turned out to be, I still laugh when I see these old 80s movies because it makes me think of my high school time. I was like, man, I was there. Some of that crazy stuff you see in movies did happen in the 80s, but the whole thing was a really interesting time, honestly, in the late 80s to be in San Antonio and during all that. But yeah, I mean, and I still keep in contact with Henry quite a bit, and I'm very proud of him. He was actually my band little brother.
Huh.
So, there was one thing about that band, because we were underdogs and because we weren't as big as the other bands, and we were just building our program and everything. It brought us really close together, and there weren't as many of us, so it was easier to know everybody. Like everybody in the school pretty much knew everybody because there were half as many students as there were at any of the other given high schools. So I think that environment allowed for that. And from what I've seen, even with what you're doing in this project, it seems like a lot of that has still remained important to Taft to foster that sense of community and belonging.
Yeah. When I first got here 4 years ago, I'm getting ready to start year 5 here. The one thing that stuck out to me right out of the gate was this idea that not only did we have a great student body presence and students who go on to do great things, but like the parent presence, the community knew us.
Yes.
It's not like that everywhere. It's
No.
really not, and it's very special. It's stuck out right in my first year here. And my second year here, I think that's when we played at Team EA, and I got to meet you for the first time. And I know you've come back sometimes and helped out with some stuff for us. We appreciate it. But like, man, like this idea of that, I just want more people to know how special this community is with alumni and with current students and with parents. Like I know I've talked to a couple of parents who no longer have kids in the program, and they still come around and hang out and help out with stuff, and their best friends still have kids coming through the program. Maybe there's 4 or 5 siblings and so on. So there's a line of siblings that are just going through and getting ready to come graduate. And so they met there when their first kid was there. It's just so great and special that these people care so much about each other and the program that I just really wanted to make sure that people knew that this was happening here at Taft.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's important. And it has been heartwarming. I've been an artist for Getson Trombones for the last 15 years. No, actually the last 22 years. And so I go to TMEA quite a bit, and it means a lot to me when I go there and I see the Taft Band Boosters facilitating the event.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I came back, I got to meet a lot of the boosters, and I did run into some boosters that no longer had students at the school that were still there helping out. And I think that speaks a lot to the community that you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's just been great. A couple of the questions for you, like this is about you. Like, what kind of new projects or new gigs do you have coming up? Like, I saw your bio, and man, like I knew this stuff, but I think that I'd forgotten some of it. Like, you've played with so many people, and you've done some arrangements and everything like that. Like, what's going on in Freddie's world today?
Well, so I just premiered a work that I've been working on because I just moved back from Indianapolis. I was in Indiana as a college professor for the last 10 years. And I've come back to Texas, and I got into a project. So we just had the premiere of a Disney show it's a review of Disney tunes, and I wrote it for Parker Jazz Club. So that was premiered recently. They haven't opened it as a show yet. It was just a premiere for a fundraiser to kind of see how it would go and get a live performance of it so we can see where we need to go with it. But so that's a project that I'm working on, and I'm hoping that that's going to come out in the fall at Parker Jazz Club here in Austin. And it's just a review of Disney tunes, but it was a big project. I think it was 13 tunes for an 11 piece. And that's exciting. And I also just finished an album with a band called the Joy Makers, and they're a period band that plays traditional jazz music from the 1920s, but it's specifically targeted on Texas composers that were performing in the 1920s in Texas. And I say a period group. We do everything we can to really recreate the music exactly like it was. So that album we're hoping is going to be coming out in April. And other than that, now that I'm out of teaching, I was a college professor for 23 years, and I'm no longer teaching college. I guess you could say I've retired as a teacher. Now I'm just playing professionally, and I play in a few different bands here on the Austin scene. We have regular gigs where we play, and I also have my own groups that at the time right now I'm working on putting together, and or some old groups that I'm bringing back from when I was gone, and just kind of sinking my feet back into the Austin music scene. And it's interesting you ask. One of the things, I'm a co-host at the Elephant Room Jam Session here. That's our big jazz club where we have a Monday jam. And they've opened it up to high school students. And so we've got a lot of young high school students that come out to this club. And it's a real jazz club. And it's 9 to 1 in the morning. They come out on a Monday. And sometimes with their parents, sometimes, they're old enough they can come out by themselves. And they attend the jam session. And of course, they don't know a lot about that world that they're coming into as young students. So currently working with some professionals here in Austin to put together, I think it's going to end up being sort of a part of an organization. Maybe the Texas Jazz Society is, I think, what we're looking at. Nothing is official yet, but our aim would be to meet these students in their high schools to prepare them to go out and play at the jam session, if that makes sense. Because, while it is a great opportunity for these students, it still is a professional working club where they are concerned about all of the things that a club would be concerned about. So it's not meant to be their playground, but they're just not knowledgeable of all of the things that go into being a professional musician that are hard to cover when you're in school. And especially at the high school level, you guys have your hands full just trying to get them to play their instruments and put their music together for their performances. And so we're looking to work with them so that they're able to put their best foot forward and understand the world that, some of these kids, the reason they're going to these jam sessions is because they aspire to be musicians in the future. Yeah. That's something that interesting has just come about in the last few weeks with the advent of these students coming out to the jam session. So I think it's going to be really beneficial for our students up here. But one of the things that I'm hoping to be getting into is, which I was doing before I left Indianapolis, is consulting with schools to come in and work with either their jazz programs to help them be better or competitive, or maybe help them know how to build their programs, but also to work primarily with their improvisationalists. Because usually in Texas, what'll happen is the jazz ensembles will all sound amazing, but then when the soloists play, they're not at the same level that the ensemble is at, because jazz improvisation is a very, very difficult skill. And without somebody there to help you, and, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel again, it makes a big difference. And I know a lot of these students and directors would like to see their students be more successful at the soloing aspect of jazz. So that's something that I noticed was a need when I was a college professor, because we would have students coming in that aspire to be musicians and they're starting at a low level. So we'd like to get in and try to help the schools better their jazz programs and also give them some instruction maybe that they don't have. But it started out of a need because we have these influx of new students coming to the jam session, and we want to make sure that they're having a good experience along next to all the actual professionals that are at the session as well. So I'm excited that, to get back into education and focus it on like a jazz center curriculum. And so those are some of the things I'm doing right now. It's really about, I've always really just wanted to play my instrument and help other people learn how to play their instrument. And jazz improvisation is such a fun and wonderful skill, but it's also challenging to study. So if I can help students along their journey like I was helped, I think that would be a good thing to be doing. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is
Cool.
and then getting my feet back in Texas. I was gone for a full decade, so I'm still, it hasn't quite been a full year that I've been back, so I'm still relearning Austin, if you will, because Austin is a very different city than it was 10 years ago. And so, but I don't know that I'm going to go back into institutional teaching. I think 23 years, I had a good time. I think I'd like to do it more privately now. And so I think that's where I'm going to focus. And then, of course, writing music. I love to write music. And so I'm just going to write for myself and as many people that will ask me to write for them, and continue to do that. I mean, I've had a pretty prolific arranging and professional recording career. So when I was a full-time college professor, a lot of that had to be put to the side. And so now I'm refocusing my energies back into that sort of thing.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
yeah, I mean, that's, and, the times are changing, as we were both talking about earlier, in education across the board. So it's interesting to see what opportunities there might be to, help all of that transition go smoothly, I guess is a way to put it.
This is a question I stole from Trevor Noah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. If you had a magic wand and could change or influence anything in music that you wanted to, what would it be?
Wow. If I had a magic wand and I could change my influence in music?
It could be your influence. It could be anything that influences music. It's wide open. Like if you could take a magic wand and just be like, hey, I'm going to make this better. What would it be?
Oh, that's a deep one. What would I do? Well, I mean, if I really had a magic wand, I would use it to try to convince the powers that be, whoever they are, of the importance of the arts, music, probably focally from my own perspective, but just the arts in general, how important it is to producing a society where people can get along with each other and work together. It seems like we're so concerned about the STEM, and we should be, our students should be educated in the STEM subjects, but it's really the humanities where we're, because in a classroom, aside from groups of that nature, which again are focused towards community, your students working on your homework to learn these subjects. But in the arts, it's a group of students coming together to work on a particular project that needs to be put forth. And in that, there are so much intrinsic lessons in socializing and socialization and working well with others and all these things that are important to our society, that are the core principles of a band program or a choir program, or even the sports are the same thing. It's about a sense of community and working towards a common goal. And it seems like we're moving away from that more and more as society progresses into the future. And I think that that's to our detriment. And so if I could, wave a magic wand and suddenly everybody on the planet Earth would recognize not only how beautiful and fulfilling and satisfying and pleasurable it is to be involved in these types of things, but just how important they are to just a functioning, healthy society. And so I credit my ability to do all of those things, work well with others and be successful in group environments and things like that, to my experiences having to work with other students of various levels and backgrounds to put together, if you will, a concert to put on for the parents, or a show on the field, or, something. And then, of course, within that, there's a built-in sense of pride and accomplishment that you get when you've actually achieved the end goal. So, I would hope that we don't lose sight of that, because as we've both discussed earlier, the education landscape is, if it's doing anything right now, it's certainly changing. And I hope that the humanities, if you will, are not thrown to the wayside in favor of just focusing on, the core nuts and bolts of how things work mathematically and of that nature. That's, like I said, I think all that's important, but it's equally as important as the arts. And so I'm always happy to participate in furthering that goal whenever I can, whether it's through TMEA, or it's through participating with Taft High School, or going out to teach, or even being present at the jam sessions where all those students were talking about, where I can try to help them avoid some of the pitfalls that I went through, or that students go through when they're trying to move forward. So I think that would be worthwhile if I could do that. So I just try to do my part. I mean, that's the real reward for me in education has always been, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so actively still in the jam session scene, is because I get to see and hopefully facilitate the progress of someone over time. And so being able to see my students go on, and I have several students who are now successful recording artists and professional musicians around the United States doing very well. And it makes me feel proud that I had some hand in their success along the way. But yeah, I think that's what I would use my magic wand for, is to instill in everybody a deep appreciation for the importance of the arts and music in particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it there. I couldn't agree with you more. Is there anything you'd like to say for the alumni or current members, or even the staff at the Taft Raider Band who are going to see this? Any words of wisdom, any advice, anything you want to offer to them?
Oh, well, I would just like to say, from the outside looking in, that the overall sense of community and pride that Taft seems to have when I've come in contact with it and come back to San Antonio is palpable. And I know from my own experience running programs and trying to foster that same sense of community, that comes with great effort and dedication and work. And so I would encourage the people that see this to know that whatever contributions they make in whatever small way or big way really do alter the future of people's lives. Ben Chasen bought my first trombone, so I really wouldn't be here today if it weren't for those people.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the band boosters, the faculty, and the students themselves. I think it's important work, and it goes beyond just the checkbox of high school, just checking that box and moving past it. I think there's a lot of growth and teaching to be done. And I would just encourage them to stay active and keep participating. Because, even providing a casserole for judges to have lunch or something, there's a great term. There's an author, his name is Charles Small, and he wrote a book called Musicking, and it's spelled Musiking. And what he proposed was turning the word music into a verb, to music, which really is to participate in the creation of music. And his premise was that, for a concert to be put on, the janitor is just as important as the concert master, because, they have to keep the place clean. Everybody involved is participating in the act of musicking, whether they're on the stage playing or not. And so I think, if you have that in your mind, that you're an active participant, even in the performance itself, regardless of whether you're holding an instrument or you practice your music to be on stage, your role is critical to facilitate all of this. So, I recommend the book. It's a great book, and it goes into all aspects of making music and participating in the music world and sort of the things we're talking about. But it's a great term to use because it really adequately brings in all of the people responsible for what it takes for the Taft band program in this case to even exist. And, it's not just the directors, it's everybody involved. And that is one thing that has always impressed me, as I mentioned before, seeing the band boosters at TMEA is a big sense of pride for me to see that they're not only actively involved in their program, but they're giving up a weekend to put on a festival that is really about 72 or more hours of nothing but work and sweat and time,
Mm-hmm.
and that their interest is so deep that they participate in that. It really is a testament, I think, to how the school has been able to foster that sense of I don't know what you would call it, the aura of the school or the personality or just the community of it. When it is a community that works together, then that's the best possible, I think, the best possible instrument to facilitate the students and their success. I hope that they stay active in that. I don't hear as much, and maybe it's just because I'm adjacent, but I don't hear as much of that coming from around. But I do hear a lot of Taft. In fact, I even tend to run into graduates, my fair share of graduates up here in Austin too, even in the music scenes. Yeah, it was nice to come back for the TMEA thing and see, Austin. Gosh, that would have been 20 or 30 years later. I don't know. I don't want to do the math on it, but yeah, like I said, it did feel like those friends that you have where you don't speak for 3 years, but when you talk to them, it's like you just spoke to them yesterday,
Yeah.
you know, and not, maybe that's a common experience for people. I don't know. I can only relate mine to Taft, but it certainly was a valuable one. And yeah, so, it's like I said, it's an honor to be even asked for the interview to come back and talk about it.
Great. Freddie, thank you so much for your time and all of this and all that you've done. You're always welcome here anytime you want. And, the door's always open. I do want to let people know here that are going to watch this. We will have a sign up sheet coming out in August for the alumni game. Our alumni game is going to be in October 31st. That's not an important day at all for anyone. Our football schedule,
Yeah.
man, we had 3 Friday games this year, and the first 2 were out of town, and that's the one. So we hope to see a lot of alumni there. If you will, and encourage other alumni that you come in contact with on taftraiderband.org. There is a
Right.
sign-up sheet for the alumni specifically. And that gives me email and stuff like that so I can reach out to people. And when we do the thing in August, the sign up sheet, if you will, to confirm if people are coming or not, that gives me information to them. We're going to post this on our Instagram page, which is at Taft Raider Alumni Band. And Freddie, we're going to tag you in this, and we're going to tag the Taft Raider Band. We also have a Facebook alumni page at Taft Raider Alumni Band as well. Freddie, thanks so much for all your time and all you've done. Man, it's been great talking to you today.
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right. You have a good one.